Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Latino Vote Substack, not podcast. The stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Woohoo! Mike Madrid.
They make them separate. They make them special down in Texas. They're a little different. We love you guys, but they're a different type of breed, and we're going to be talking about Texas tonight because I think Texas is going to be extremely, extremely important in determining a whole lot of stuff from the bottom up. Everything from Latino turnout to the Latino break in the race everybody's watching, which is the Talarico versus Crockett Senate race. The Paxton Cornyn race is the Latino coverage that isn't getting as much, I think, attention and focus, but Latino voters, I think, are going to be very determinative there as well. You got Bobby Polito's race, you've got the Allred race, you've got all sorts of races. And fortunately, we have a redneck Mexican on the ground.
Here we go.
He's on a journey. He's a man with a mission. He's, I think, in San Antonio now. He texted me late last night, said, I'm leaving Austin. I'll be in San Antonio in just a little bit. He's following the Talarico bus. Tell us what is going on deep in the heart of Texas.
I am all tortillaed up. I am full of good tortillas, and I am in a good, happy place. I'm getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and working out for many hours before the sun comes up, and then I'm eating my face off in tortillas, beans, and rice because you can't get none of this shit in Washington, D.C. I have been with Talarico and with his team, and I was with him yesterday in San Antonio and got to see and feel the energy for real on the ground. I watched him fill up a capacity auditorium. I don't know, 500-600 people probably in there. Could have been 1,000, but it was wall to wall, standing room only. Mike Madrid, something I learned yesterday, here's some insight for everybody listening, put you in the room, is that James Talarico, after he gets done, does not run to his next event. They put a 3-hour buffer between his events because he stays, everybody gets in line, and he shakes everybody's fucking hand before they leave and takes a picture with them.
You don't see that very often.
I told the staff, I'm like, look, I'm an old goat. I got a lot of white hair. I'm like, this shit, I've seen that maybe 4 or 5 times where folks like be there, talk to him, listen to him. Like there's a lot of politicians I've been around that are full of shit, but like, he's like, no. All these people came. It's Sunday afternoon. I want to talk to them. It was a lot of energy, really good. I sent Andreas some clips. We can share it later, kind of behind the scenes with him in the war room. We had just lived through the shooting in Austin that had happened just hours before, where this guy was killing folks in Austin. It was a crazy day on the trail, but there's a lot of energy happening.
All right, well, back up for everybody. When did you get into town?
I got here. I flew in from New York on Saturday.
New York City?
New York City. Yes, I flew in from New York. I decided right before we started bombing Iran, which we'll talk about on a podcast, we don't have to do it here, that I would do CNN where it would never even make it on CNN because we decided to bomb Iran. But I digress. I went to San Antonio. I got there. I met up with the team. We did the big rallies, and all day I kicked off a canvas like the old days down on the south side of San Antonio. And then he went to Houston, and you had your thing backwards. I came to Austin and started meeting with folks because the headquarters is here. And that's where I've been doing and talking and meeting with people on the ground here. I've got a dinner tonight, actually, with the president of the FL-CIO.
So, okay. So what? Tell us about what the Talarico campaign looks like in terms of planning, because normally you're running from city to city. What you're telling me is he's actually shaking hands and meeting people and talking to them and answering questions, and people waiting a 3-hour buffer. That's unheard of. Like, the candidate's time is so valuable at this moment. He's saying, I don't care. People came out there, gave us part of their day. We'll do a far less events, but we're going to do them better, I guess, and build some intensity. Is that the idea? Is that the thinking?
Yep. And then they all volunteer on election day. Before I left, halfway through the handshaking, he took everybody in the auditorium, lined them up where they could come around front, and he walked down and met everybody. It was lined up out the venue, out the front door, and around the venue after he had spoke to shake his hand, and nobody was leaving. That made me understand that something really special was happening there. What really makes this campaign different, other than that, what I have noticed, and this was me digging into the numbers with the campaign last night, is, Mike, they'll have close to 28,000 volunteers tomorrow on the doors and on the phones. They have built organization in each one of these cities where they're going to actually have folks. This campaign will come down to, do campaigns matter? I'm not going to speak ill of the Congresswoman, but the Talarico campaign has built an apparatus that's knocking on doors, calling people, running digital ads, running Spanish and English TV, Spanish and English radio, and all of the things that me and you would say you have to do to win over a long period of time.
And you're not seeing rallies from the Crockett campaign as much, right? They're not trying to do what you're doing, or are they?
They are. It's just different in the way she's dealing with them. And she's going to different places. Like, she spent a lot of time in Dallas and Houston. She has to have ginormous African-American turnout there. Like, she hasn't spent that much time in San Antonio, and she's been there, or coming to Austin where James is from. Like, they're both in Houston right now speaking, not but 5 blocks from each other.
And Houston's critical. Why? For both.
Because it's the largest Latino and Black population in the state. Harris County, where Houston is, as big as 12 states in New England. It's just ginormous. Think about it this way, Mike. This is how I can make it relevant. It's L.A.
No,
LA.
it's not. No, brother. It ain't L.A.
I mean, it's figured like a big population of people.
I see.
But yeah, but with good Mexican food. Oh,
Tex-Mex. If you got to call something Tex-Mex, it's because it ain't Mexican food.
Let's move on and talk about congressional races before you embarrass yourself.
Yeah. Talk to us. What's going on?
Here's something else that folks don't know is that down in where your boy crush is, down in Texas 15, Bobby Polito, you should know that Bobby's been running a general election campaign since day one, but he does have this Latina doctor running against him who, as of this morning, has spent $1 million against Bobby Polito in the primary.
Against him? A lot of negative?
Yes, lots of negative. Calling him a Republican, saying he lives somewhere else, just all that dirty stuff that you see.
So I'm running numbers and data real quick before we get to Polito, just for clarification. Harris County is half the size of L.A.
Just like L.A., just like I said.
And it's got half as good a food, Mexican food,
just
as
like
LA.
I said, L.A.
So perfect.
Harris County in Houston is the biggest place in Texas. And think about if Dallas and Fort Worth together are as big as Harris County. So that's the 2 giant areas. Yeah. And then there's big areas in they call it if you took Austin and San Antonio, which are connected by Highway 35, and put them together, they would be almost in the same category. So those are the 3 giant population centers. Again, we talk about the Rio Grande Valley like every Latino lives there, but it will only be 8% of the electorate on the primary.
That's really, really important, guys, because that's like the Central Valley. We talk about Fresno and Bakersfield and the agricultural core of California. That's not that big. It's a very small part of California, but it takes on a dominant role because of the characterization of who Latinos are, which is a more rural, more, recently migrated, overwhelmingly Spanish speaking. The urban cores of Texas and the urban cores of California is where the vast, vast, vast majority of Latinos are at. So that's why Chuck's in Houston. That's why Talarico's in Houston. That's why Crockett's in Houston. And this is all going to come down to turnout, right, Chuck?
Yeah, and then they'll migrate back to their home turf for election night. She goes to Dallas. He'll come to Austin. They'll have their parties in each respected state. And on election night, here's some things to keep an eye on. The Valley, if it's only 8% of the electorate, it comes in earlier because it's easier to count. So if Talarico's winning the Valley 60-40, that really means something because it doesn't mean he's going to lose Latinos in other states. They're not the same kind of Latinos, let's be clear. Yeah. But they may come in first because if you just get some big number from Houston, you don't know if it's the Black boxes or the Latino boxes, and they have a robust Asian population there as well. So you can only take, but if you look at the Dallas numbers, she should win Dallas. And if Dallas comes in and it's 55-45 and that's all she's winning by, that's problematic for her. If she's winning.
Margins matter on election night. And in Texas, one of the things you do much better than California, and everybody does, is you count votes quickly. You don't mess around. Like, you guys are going to see data within a couple of hours of the polls closing. And I think what you're saying is that those smaller rural counties, the star counties, the counties down in the Rio Grande Valley, what those numbers tell us, margins. If somebody's winning decisively, it's going to not exactly compare to the Harris County, Tarrant County Latino voter, but it's going to give us a pretty good indication of which way the vote's breaking.
Yeah, and it's not the end all be all, but as me and Mike have talked about, in many of those border counties, it's 80 and 90% Latino. So if Talarico's winning at 70-30, you're like, oh, something's happening. It don't mean he's going to win everything 70-30, but if those Latinos who have been trending to the right are voting for him 70-30, that's something big. And then if she's not winning Dallas by enough, or if he's not winning Austin by enough, because he should win Austin, he should also win San Antonio handily because that's where he was a school teacher. He taught kids school in San Antonio. So, like, this is his home turf. This is really, if you think about it in this way, everybody, stay with me. San Antonio and Austin are the same size as Dallas and Fort Worth. This is his base, and that's her base. Neither one of them have a footprint in Houston, and it's the biggest. So maybe if you look at it like whoever's winning Houston is probably the end of the game.
That's really a really good way to look at it. And we'll do some live stuff tomorrow night as the numbers come in. We can do it either on Substack or we'll be tweeting numbers back and forth. We'll get a little bit nerdier too. And again, this stuff starts to move fast on election nights because you're really looking for margins here, especially when turnout is this big. I think it's so big, it's kind of making us wonder and second guess ourselves a little bit. More ballots have been cast in Texas through the first 7 days of early voting for the midterms than any recent midterm or presidential election year, driven almost entirely by by Democrats of all colors, straight sizes, rural, urban, suburban, college educated, non-college educated. The last data I saw was there's almost 3 Democrats voting for every 1 Republican in Texas early voting. That's never happened before. We've seen 2-to-1s in 2018. This is 3-to-1. Now, this is just early voting, by the way. There's going to be a big Republican push, but there's no, unless there's something colossal happening, to see Republicans catch up and surpass the Democratic vote, I think would be pretty extraordinary. That's saying something in Texas. Chuck, am I right? Or am I missing it? Or am I analyzing it wrong?
We have not outvoted the Republicans in this state in early vote since 2002. So we just broke a 24-year record of outvoting them in in-person early vote. And for all of you at home, we've always had in-person early vote in Texas, and we've always never really had much vote by mail because it's very restrictive. So I'll put that out there as a marker for all of you nerds. But Mike, let me give you these 2 numbers, which is 2018 was a robust off-year election. 2022, probably not as much. But at the end of in-person early vote, Mike, which was on Fridays when they wrapped everything up and they had all the numbers and all the data to see everybody that had voted, more Democrats had voted in-person early, Mike, than the entire, let me say that again, the entire primary in 2018. So already.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Already. Crazy.
So now you're going to see massive lines tomorrow. Massive. I mean, is Texas ready to handle the amount of people that are going to be showing up, or they got a problem with that?
I mean, look, you're an analyst person. You're a data person. What we don't know is if Mike is right. I think Mike is right. What we don't know is how much of our election day vote did we cannibalize by being energized for early vote. Now, I don't know. Mike's probably right because this energy just wouldn't die. Everybody's like, I'm not showing up on Tuesday. It probably continues.
I think it does. And at a minimum, even if it doesn't continue at the same level, you're going to see a Republican burst. Like, you're not going to still see a 3-to-1 margin. Republicans are going to be day of for, whatever. You're not voting by mail in Texas. You're just showing up in early voting. Yes, there are some people that have been waiting 18 months every day, chalking that line off in the jail cell, waiting for voting day. I get that. That is a big part of it. But I should say I've never. There's only one other time where I have seen massive Latino turnout start to crest like a tidal wave and then collapse. And that was Florida 2016 general election, where the Hillary Clinton campaign cannibalized the Latino vote by an aggressive, massive vote by mail program. This is not vote by mail.
Zero.
So it's harder to cannibalize when there's no vote by mail. It just is. So remember that, and we'll see if that bears out or not. But
You're
I
probably
think
right.
I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see long lines and people waiting, and just a real energized Texas. I'm a little on both sides, but far more on the Democratic side.
It's important to say that the Republican turnout has also been astronomically high, but it just don't compare to the craziness of the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
And what me and Mike aren't talking about, and I cannot wait to win, but I cannot also not wait to see who these folks are, because me and Mike have seen this crazy pattern in this vote, which is over 30% of the voters so far in person, y'all, have no Democratic primary history. They don't vote in Democratic primaries. Now, that's made up of three groups of people for all of you at home. The biggest group of those people are general election voters who are showing up to vote in a primary because they're pissed, and me and Mike's been talking about that. So they're that Democrat who votes in presidential, and sometimes they vote in the congressionals, but there hadn't been that much stuff on the Democratic primary, and they'll vote for whoever wins the primary in November. 30% of those folks are coming back and voting in this primary because Talarico and Jasmine 1 has got them jazzed up. That's one. B, you have over 11, they're saying between 11 and 13% of these Democratic primary voters who've showed up in person, Mike, have voted in a Republican primary in the last 3 cycles, which is crazy. But if you listen to Chuck Rocha, I'll tell you that in the last 12 years in Texas, Republicans have pretty much taken over everything except the core of the cities. So if your buddy in East Texas is running for county commissioner, he's running as a Republican because that's the only game in town. And I think that's why you see that switch back and forth. I'd be curious to see what you think.
Let me say those 2 data points again, because I've never seen anything like this. You're telling me 1/3 of the voters that have shown up and voted in the Democratic primary
have no Democratic primary history.
And now, this is important to understand in Texas. In Texas, you don't register in a party. Not all states do you register in a party. Texas is one of those. You're registered to vote, but when you show up, because there's no vote by mail, so you actually have to walk in, and they either ask you, Chuck, or they tell, or you ask for one, or they offer. But
when you walk into when I ran the elections in East Texas, there's a card table, and you walk in, and there's a Democratic ballot and a Republican. As soon as you walk in, they're like, Republicans line up here, Democrats line up here for which ballot you want.
So this might be a little bit strange for people who live in a state like California and most states where you do register. You can choose and change your party every time you, not the same day, of course, but every election cycle, you can vote Republican in 2022 and vote Democrat in 2024. That's how it's done in Texas. So what Chuck is saying is 1/3, a full 30% of people that are voting in the Democratic primary have no history of voting in a Democratic election before. Is that right, Chuck?
Yes, and when you vote early in person, and as I was an elections judge, they mark you on the list of voters. So if you tried to show up on election day and vote again, you're already showed as marked. And this is important what I'm going to say next about this Republican runoff that's going to happen in the Senate. You cannot vote in the Democratic primary and then show up 2 months later to vote in the Republican runoff. Once you put that card down for this primary, you can't change again till the next primary.
Got it. So you can vote however you want in the primary. You cannot change parties in the runoff if there is one. We'll talk about that because there's likely to be one on the Republican side, less likely on the Democratic side this time. But then in November, it doesn't matter because everybody's voting the same ballot.
Right. And then the next time we have a presidential election, if you want to vote, if you vote in the Democratic primary this time, you can vote in Republican that time. It doesn't tie you to that just for that one cycle.
Yes. Now, somebody asked, can you vote in both? No, you get to choose one. You get to choose. You're either voting in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary. Don't get to vote in both. So that was that question. The other one is, and this is Mike Madrid saying this. I don't know if Chuck wants to be silent on this, or I want to hear your opinion if you're okay talking about it. To me, 30% of new voters coming into the Democratic primary is a good sign for Talarico, because it's not as much. Talarico's appeal and his strategy is beyond the Democratic base, and by definition, that's who it is. Now, there are going to be some people who would surmise, oh, maybe it's people that are coming in and playing games. That may happen on the margins, but you're talking like 1%. I mean, people that are that methodical, people don't go show up, especially say we got to show up and actually go in to play shenanigans. There's too much good action all over the place to throw away your vote that way. Some people invariably will, very, very small amount. To me, this is a sign that there is a lot of energy of people that are both Democrat and non-traditional Democrats looking to engage in the Democratic primary. That's my opinion. I'm not saying that is Chuck's.
I will say this for those nerds that follow us on our podcast and here on Substack. This is the reason, and almost entirely the reason, that the polls have been all over the place, is you cannot poll people who don't have a history of voting in a primary for primary voting history. You don't even call them. Mike Madrid will tell you that.
Yeah, there's no way to weight to them. There's no way to know who's going to. And that's what's happening. So let's talk about this for a second. Because the polling right now, the public polling is what we call muddy. It's a mess. It's all over the place. You can find a poll that says Crockett's going to win by 20, Talarico's going to win by 20. You say Latinos are going for Crockett by 10, going for Talarico by 15. Black voters are showing up for Crockett at 85% or 78%. White voters are plus 51 Talarico or plus 32. There's nothing consistent about any of the polling. And we're going to learn a lot about who made the right guesses, because they are sophisticated guesses, but guesses nonetheless, about how to weight the poll. Now, weight, I mean WEIGHT, which means how much of a vote share do you put on these different subsamples in these different constituencies. Very important. And what Chuck is saying is exactly right. You really need to listen to this. Write it down, listen to it with a clap of thunder, and don't forget it. When you have this many people showing up in a Democratic primary, a third of the electorate, and you have no way of knowing that that's going to happen, nor which demographics they're coming from, it's impossible to have your poll look consistent with anybody else's, because everybody is just sort of guessing, like I just did, on who I think that benefits. That's Mike Madrid's opinion. But everybody else's opinion is essentially in this environment, if not equally valid, somewhat valid, and you can argue about how much weight, what percentage those respondents need to be if, to Chuck's point, you're even polling people that have no history of voting in a Democratic Party, because why would you, when the assumption is that's a very small, low single-digit fraction of the Democratic vote historically, and now it turns out it's 30% of the entire early vote in the state. That's why, at least my theory as to why the polling is just so all over the place. Chuck, what are your thoughts?
There's one thing that's been consistent, and it's because they're winning them so overwhelmingly. And again, you can be off by 10 points and these things still be true, which is Talarico is winning white voters. Whether he's winning them by 5 or by 30, we don't know, but every poll has showed him winning white voters. So that's a constant, even if your poll is off by 30% because of these voters. Guess what? In every poll, Jasmine Crockett is winning black voters because she's so overwhelmingly, your poll can be off by 30% because you didn't talk to those new people showing up, and she's winning those. What is the name of our podcast? What's the name of this Substack? It's the Latino Vote Substack and podcast. And guess what has been going back and forth in these polls, all depending on who you're talking to? Oh, Jasmine Crockett's winning. Oh, Talarico's winning Latinos. Oh, this one. It's because the margins are closer and because we have been a smaller group of voters. What to really watch for is what percentage of this electorate is Latino? What percentage of the electorate is white or black? Because that matters on this election. Let me give you a little history. In 2022, in the last off year, white voters made up 46% of the vote, Latinos made up 29%, and black voters made up 13%, and the rest were others, mainly Asian Americans. Well, as it stands now in the early vote, because we know who's early voted in person, that white number's 46%. Imagine that. Well, the Latino number has went from 30 to 33%, and the black numbers went from 13 to 15. So you see an increase with Latino voters, an increase with Latino voters. White voters staying pretty statistically the same, but look at that difference in the numbers. If Jasmine Crockett, this is really good for all of you nerds, if Jasmine Crockett increases her proportion with a surge of black voters from 13 to 15 or 16%. That's nothing compared to a 1% increase with white voters that make up 46% of the electorate. So if James Talarico is winning that even 55-45, and she's winning the black vote 80-20, that's still not enough to make that up. Am I doing that math right, Mike?
Your math is mathing exactly right, which is why I have been a little bit critical of the Crockett campaign's strategy for a few reasons. The first is I just don't think it's good strategy because of what you just said. It's just not good math. The math just isn't there. The winner of this primary is going to have to win the Latino vote. I mean, I think that's fair to say. Unless Talarico's numbers with white voters are just too peculiar and too strange, and that might be. I am seeing polling showing older white, like 65 years of age and older white voters, white Democrats voting more for Crockett, which doesn't surprise me that much. That's very much the base of the party. But you can't overcome a 60-40 split with Latinos. You can't. If for either candidacy, whoever if somebody wins a 60-40 split, if Crockett wins, she's going to win. If Talarico gets 60-40, she's going to win.
What you're saying, Mike, is probably the most important thing. On election night when you're watching, whoever is winning the Latino vote is going to be the winner of this primary. There's no way Talarico loses the Latino vote and can be the senator, be the nominee. Neither can Jasmine Crockett. It's just impossible by the math.
Or very, 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 very unlikely.
That's true. I shouldn't say impossible.
Yeah, but it's as close to impossible as you can get. And that's why everybody's watching this vote and watching the strategy. And I know that, Chuck and I both have been watching this race very closely. We've been watching Bobby Polito. We'll talk about Bobby in just a second because I love that race. It's gonna say a lot as well. But the Crockett campaign, and again, this is Mike Madrid, and there's a great Politico article where Chuck and I are both quoted in it, by the way.
Oh.
Andreas, if you could post that in the chat, that would be fantastic too. Where everyone likes Chuck's shirts because it's black. He's starting to look, no words, but he's got that Talarico.
We're going to get one from Madrid that says Rocha.
Yeah.
Rocha.
Live in La Vida Rocha is what it's going to say.
Live in La Vida Rocha is what the damn thing's going to say. There's, like you said about the House races, is like, think about the turnout we just talked about in Dallas. So you had this astronomical black turnout in Dallas, but guess what? The white suburban turnout in Dallas has been through the roof. And you've heard me and Mike talk about this race that is super interesting because it makes my mathing go to mathing, which is the Texas 33. Does all of that new turnout help Julie Johnson or Colin Allred?
See, that's why this race gets even more fascinating. I'm going to prognosticate and project a little bit here by saying when Colin Allred kind of dropped the bomb saying, calling me mediocre was racist and don't come after me unless I call for you stuff. To me, that was what they were planning on was a lower voter turnout where they needed a greater share of the black vote, hoping the Latino vote does what it always does, which is lag behind. It's a slightly larger population. It's actually considerably larger population, I think, in Texas, but lower voter turnout, which is typical of the Latino vote. Is historically we don't have a high voter turnout. So if you're going to have a lower voter turnout, a sharper, higher percentage for Crockett of the black vote goes a much longer way than a huge Latino turnout. So that kind of politics, I mean, this is again, Mike Madrid, I don't like it anyway for a whole lot of reasons, but that was the strategy. That's the avenue that they took. What happens at this point is if you start to see a larger increasing share of the Latino vote, it's going to go one way or the other. Is either that vote is going to be compelled by that Crockett message or repelled by that Crockett message. I think it's going to be repelled by that. We're going to see what happens. But that ultimately, again, is part of what we talk about in this article that Andreas will put in the chat and put below when we post this thing, because Politico jumps into this exact question and starts looking at what this means. Because when you've got a vote that's essentially going to, the next couple of years be a third, you can only have two candidates. And unless you have, candidates that are multiracial, you're going to start seeing in Texas candidates that are black or white or Latino, and these different appeals to these different ethnic and racial bases. math is going to start getting different every election cycle going forward because the Latino vote's growing so fast.
It's two different philosophies on how to run a race. Jasmine Crockett's philosophy may work. You never know. She is doubling down on her base in a Democratic primary. That is not a bad election, especially if it's low turnout, to Mike's point. But if it's high turnouts, it skews everything. And that's where, going back to what Mike Madrid said in the beginning, is important. Democrats, independents, Republicans can all walk in the door and say, I want the Talarico ballot. So they may not have voted. They may be true independents. They may be moderate Republicans. That was a Talarico strategy, along with running a robust Latino program and doing long-term messaging to them and centering a lot of it in faith and family and on economic populism, and that it's not the left and the right. It's the top versus the bottom and all of the things that sound very, as Mike would say, hopeful.
Yeah. Hopeful, aspirational. The political, Andreas is having trouble finding the political article. If somebody's read it, go ahead and post it in there. It's Adam Wren, W-R-E-N, from Politico, ran the last 48 hours. If somebody wants to kind of stick it up there and put in the chat to share it with other people to read, that would be great. Yeah, aspirational. That's the right word. That's the term, that hopefulness. That takes me to kind of Bobby Polito, that kind of politics, right? Where he was on the show with us a few months back, and he said, Latinos consider themselves broke but not poor.
Still the best line.
Oh, it's the best line I've heard in 20 years. It's poor as, a permanent state, broke as temporary, and that hopefulness is what kind of keeps people going. So talk to us about what you're seeing. Have you been in the Rio Grande Valley at all, Chuck? You guys been?
No, but I talked to folks down there this morning. They're like, Bobby should be okay, but she has spent $1 million. They talked about the discipline that Bobby has had. They've been trying to pull him to the left and drag him to the left while he's been and not taking the bait. So, that's something super interesting to watch. He's run a general election campaign. How much does he win by? I think he wins. Especially, he hasn't spent a quarter of the money. He's had some super PACs come in and spend some money on his behalf. Welcome PAC has. The Blue Dog Caucus has. It'll also be interesting to watch Vicente Gonzalez. He has a Democratic Socialist running against him. There are primaries, as we've said, with Julie Johnson running against Colin Allred. Who comes out of the Texas 35th, the new district in San Antonio, we'll dig into, because there is a sheriff running against a former Marine down there, which then the Republicans are all over the place. Donald Trump was here on Friday with all three, Mike, of the Republican Senate candidates.
That's awkward.
Crazy town.
And let's talk about that. Can we talk about that a little bit? The Senate Republican side of that Senate seat?
Sure.
So Donald Trump descends into Texas. He says, they're all fine people. I'm not, going to say anything. Why he shows up to Texas without making a decision, I think, is a huge political mistake. The main reason why is because the only possible reason you show up is because you're trying to goose turnout. They're seeing that Republicans are depressed, that there's no motivation to vote. So he's literally got to fly down to Texas, of all places, makes one stop, tries to drive turnout. He's trying to get as much press, local press, as he can, telling Texas Republicans, I love you, show up. I know things are tough, but hang in there. These are all good candidates. Bad message, bad timing, because you're going to see, my opinion is, if you don't see really sky high Republican turnout, what you're going to see is more bad news for Donald Trump, saying he showed up, and Texas Democrats outnumber Texas Republicans. That's a bad look. That's a bad look. There's no win. What is the win Donald Trump could possibly get out of that? Moreover, and again, specifically as it goes to the Latino vote, I've seen the polling all over the place, but most of the polling is showing Latinos in the Republican primary backing Paxton, who is the more conservative, extreme kind of guy, right? And that I'm not surprised by that, incidentally, and I'll tell you why. I think the moderate Latino Republicans that moved and shifted so far to the right in 2024 have bailed on the Republican Party, and they're like, this is just nuts. So they're voting in the Talarico Crockett primary. These are some of those people that Chuck was talking about, those 30%, or no, these are 12%. 12% of Democrats, people who voted in the Democratic primary,
have a Republican voting history.
Have a Republican voting history. So this is what we call this is leakage. The leakage is 12%. That is a massive, massive, massive number. Usually if that gets to 3 or 4%, there's a problem. you're at like 12. You're at 3 times that. You add that on top of the fact that 30% of these folks don't have a history of essentially voting at all, or certainly not voting in the Democratic primary before. You put that together, that's a hell of a lot of votes. That's a hell of a lot of energy on the Democratic side. And that's why you combine that with 3 times more Democrats showing up. There's 3 Democrats showing up for every Republican. I don't know how this could be painted as anything other than very, very, very good for Democrats. And again, I'm not going to say any more with one candidate or the other, but there's a very good chance that we come out of this with, if not a Republican runoff, which I think is likely. I want your thoughts on that. You end up with a Paxton Talarico runoff.
So I think
or
you end up
general.
Let's talk about the runoff, though. It's almost guaranteed that Paxton's going to win that thing, but he's not going to get 50%. And for those of you who are not from Texas, you have to win the primary by 50% of the top 2 people go to a runoff 60 days or so later. So think about what we just said about this 12% leakage and about who's going to show up in May, March, April, May, in May to vote in a Republican runoff. Now, there could be other runoffs in congressional races driving turnout, but think about what we just said about this 12% of, I'm going to call them moderate Democrats, moderate Republicans, folks that are motivated who voted in the past in Republican primaries. That's who John Cornyn needs to vote for him in a runoff. And as I just told all of you girls and boys, if you pulled that Democratic primary ticket, you cannot show up to try to bail out Cornyn in a runoff. You are done voting unless you go to a runoff in the Democratic runoff because they have your name. It's on a piece of paper, and it says Democrat of the last ballot you pulled, so you cannot pull the Republican runoff, even if you try. And that's why it's doubly bad for Cornyn, because 12% of the folks who normally would have voted for him, if there was nothing on the Democratic ballot in the primary, just went and voted for probably Talarico.
I think that's right. Now, look, for people that really want to get nerdy, some of the names, I'm going to recommend some follows right now. Obviously, follow the Austin American-Statesman. They're doing really good journalism. The Texas Tribune, really good journalism. Adam Carlson. I mean, Chuck, you and I both know Adam. He's posting a lot of really, really good data. Make sure that you're following that. Not making he made a little bit of a prognostication. His read of the tea leaves, I don't want to speak for him, suggests that there's probably a slight Talarico lead. That matches sort of what I've kind of heard internals. I don't want you to have to put you on the spot, Chuck, but he also is very clear that there's so much data all over the place that nobody really remembers seeing a race this all over the place. It's just so muddy. It's so messy. But it's really hard to lead to any conclusions.
But the thing that's different about what we know so far and what the beauty of what Adam has done and other data folks on the internet is folks get on there and they give their hot takes. They get on there and they talk about this poll, that poll. When Adam digs into the numbers, those are real voters. We have the file back now on everybody who voted in person. We know the things I'm telling you about these new voters are just factual because we can see their voting history. This ain't me or Mike just saying this is what we think is happening. Now, what we don't know is we assume that those new voters probably vote Talarico, or we assume that black voters do this, and we assume white voters do that because me and Mike have a lot of white hair on our face, because we just know. But we just know that they voted, and we know where they voted in the past. It'll give us some indication of where they'll vote in the future, but none of us really know. But what Adam has done is said, okay, well, how many of these people are black? How many of these people are women? Women, again, have turned out big in the Democratic primary. 58% of the Democratic electorate are female, to Mike Madrid's place about females showing up and outvoting men.
58%.
Women.
58% are women in the Democratic primary. That's extraordinary. And that benefits Crockett, I'm going to say. I mean, I think that women have a more likelihood of voting for other women. So that's what I would, again, how much that sticks, I don't know. These are the way that I think we're trying to discern what lanes are being occupied by which candidate, even though it's super, super tough. What do you think of, I know this is one you're probably not watching too closely. I just think it's kind of fascinating. I think Dan Crenshaw, the Republican, with the guy with the eye patch, I think he loses.
Yeah, because the president came out and endorsed the other guy.
And Ted Cruz has kind of got a gun out for him. I mean, politically.
Or maybe it was Ted Cruz. Maybe it's not the president. Y'all don't quote me on it. I think it was Ted Cruz who endorsed the other guy.
Yeah. So
you should pay attention all across Texas because there's a few incumbents. You should pay attention in Houston, where the guy who just won the special election, Menifee, is taking on Green, the guy that was kicked out of the State of the Union again this year. Like, they're running against each other in a primary. Like, a lot of things could happen. I know we don't want to get into details on Tony Gonzalez's race, but again, just another place to watch a primary. Does he go to a runoff? Does Tony make the runoff? What's going on? And there's some suburban races around Houston in the 9th and other places where, with so much turnout, we have no idea of the dramatic differences and shifts that can happen in both parties, where Republicans or incumbents could be in some trouble for the first time.
I think that's absolutely right, too. And like I said, a lot of this stuff in hindsight, as we're going through all of the debris after this election, because I think whenever there's a high turnout election, crazy things happen, like shocking things happen, things you can't predict. Same thing with very, very low turnout elections. So I think you're going to see a lot of big surprises. You guys have a lot of statewide races, like 26, I think, constitutional offices, Chuck. You guys like vote for mosquito abatement districts and railroad commissioners and all cattle rancher commissioner.
For the first stop, I already stopped.
Whatever.
Just stop.
Yeah.
We for the first time, and I give the Texas PAC, who came in and helped do a lot of this recruitment, for the first time in the history of Texas elections, there's a Democratic opposition candidate in every state House race, and there's over 140 of those.
Wait, say that again.
I think there's 140 state reps in Texas.
Whew. Yeah. And I mean, there's a long ballot in Texas this time, too. It's going to be interesting to see what we call the undercount, right? I bet with 30% of people, new voters, you're going to see a massive undercount. What that means is you'll have people coming in that want to vote for Talarico and then won't vote for the other, 3 dozen names. They're going to be like, I don't care who the cattle rustler commissioner is. Like, I don't know what that is, and I don't care. But I'm going to vote for Talarico, and that's it. And then so I'll vote for that one. And then when we see the drop off, at the top, Talarico may get 100 votes in that county, and then down below, the other positions may get 25 or 30. That drop off is what we call the undervote. And so I think there's going to be a massive undervote, which again doesn't mean anything for the outcomes of races, because whoever gets the most votes wins. But it is going to be telling, because there's so many new voters showing up to vote, that's a dynamic of high turnout elections.
Let me clean up my record here. I just Googled it while we were sitting here. I was close. It's 150 state reps.
150 state reps.
And they are pretty much, just so you know, unpaid.
Because you've got a part-time legislature too, right?
They come every other year for about 120 days.
Okay.
And they don't, and anyway, we'll get on that later. But look, guys, I've got to run and get ready to go do a thing. Me and Mike may come on again, and I'll leave him for the final word. Tomorrow I'll be in Austin. I'm going to be in the war room with James. And let me say this before I get off of here, is that I have been around big campaigns, Bernie Sanders, Ruben Gallego, and seen some big campaigns. I want to give my hat tip to a great group of young folks who, I was backstage with all these kids. They're all in their 30s. They're all on their laptops. They're all banging out press releases and getting field reports. And I'm just like, I forget the day-to-day grind every day. They're eating out of a plastic bag. And I just hat tip to that amazing crew over there could pull off history here. What goes unseen in all these campaigns, even in the Republican campaigns, are these campaign kids that are just banging it out every day, trying to make it happen. So I salute all of you, and especially the Talarico team. And Mike, thanks for taking the time today and letting me be on here with you.
Go get it, Chuck. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for all your hard work, and we will talk again really shortly. I'm going to jump off too. I've got to run to I'm in New Orleans right now, so it's at 6:00. Let's try to touch bases tomorrow in some way, shape, or form, especially as we start to get early votes in. Chuck may not be able to make it because he's got commitments there with the campaign on the ground in Texas. I'm not too sure if I'll be doing some press availability. I got to do some podcasts with The Hill and some other folks. But if I can jump on, you guys let me know if you want me to jump on and start doing some early analysis of the Texas primary race We'll look at the Rio Grande Valley. We'll look at Harris County. We'll look at Tarrant County. We'll start making some projections on what's likely to happen. But give me that feedback. Thank you for the likes. Thanks for the time, guys. And we'll talk again, hopefully tomorrow.